Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Thursday, August the 27th, 2020.
Democrat-run cities across this country are being overrun by violent mobs.
Heroism is rebuilding our communities, not destroying them.
Be a radical for our republic, for which I stand.
Donald Trump didn't start any new wars. He brought troops home.
American officials will start peace negotiations to end America's longest war.
100 years ago, women secured the right to vote. Let's honor our heroes.
I want my daughter to grow up in President Donald J. Trump's America.
He has stood by me, and he will stand up for you.
I am thankful that President Trump values the life of the unborn.
Life begins at conception.
The Biden-Harris ticket is the most radically pro-abortion campaign in history.
The most radical anti-police ticket in history.
Hostile to farmers. They would keep you locked in your house until you become dependent on the government for everything.
During a once-in-a-century pandemic, the president's effort for New York was phenomenal.
There were very fine white supremacists in Charlottesville. He didn't say that.
Donald Trump truly cares about black lives.
Joe Biden will not do what it takes to maintain order.
Joe Biden would set America on a path of socialism and decline. But we're not going to let it happen.
It was a lot. Again tonight, the aggressive defense of law enforcement comes as the country faces new tensions, of course, over race and use of force by...
That was a condensed edition of last night's Night 3 of the Republican National Convention. Thanks to MSNBC for that compilation. And what all of those speakers have in common is that they lied their asses off. On this episode of The Politicrat, a brief look at night number 3 of the Republican National Convention, fact-checking, plus the NBA walks out, and it's the players that make that move. Plus, the racist and white terrorist who killed 2 people being given benign labels in the media. A look at that as well, and a few other things to talk about coming up next. Welcome back. So night number 3 of the Republican National Convention was more of the same. All a dizzying array of speeches that were designed to exhaust, designed to overwhelm, and designed to absolutely suck the life out of you. That was exactly the design of the Republican National Convention through Donald Trump, was to bamboozle you with a speaker after a speaker after a speaker after a speaker, just pounding you into a sense of submission with all of the propaganda and gaslighting. This has been, if I can say anything at all about this convention, this Republican convention this week, it has been a dizzying array of American flags, a dizzying array of musical choices and all of this pomp and circumstance. It's been at times a slickly produced reality television show. That is really what this convention is, but it's also, at its core, a parade of lies. It is propaganda of really fascistic proportions. It is pure propaganda, gaslighting, lies, and a production staged in an alternate universe. This whole convention, including last night, was about that. was about speakers telling you for the second consecutive night that coronavirus is over with, even though the truth is, the facts are, that about 181,000 people have died from the coronavirus in the United States and counting. Even though people are still dying from this virus, it is far from over. Even though yesterday the CDC changed the guidelines on who should be tested without any explanation why. Even though the White House itself, Trump's White House, were the ones who ordered the CDC to automatically change the guidelines, to soften the guidelines to such a point that people who are asymptomatic, who may have been exposed to those with coronavirus in the new CDC guidelines, were not asked to be tested. That was the change. In previous guidelines, those asymptomatic individuals who were exposed or may have been exposed to coronavirus were, in those guidelines, recommended to be tested. But yesterday, all of a sudden, because of Trump's White House, due to the orders of Donald Trump, the CDC suddenly changed their guidelines, and with no explanation, no reason why. This is the kind of garbage that this RNC convention is. And almost everybody who speaks at the convention, and this was the same thing last night, so many of these individuals were either people who had been indicted, people who, had been involved in a scandal, people who were, awaiting indictment, people who had been connected to crime. I mean, this is a parade of criminals. And this country, by the way, when you really look at this convention, which has no platform, even though Mike Pence got up there and lied and said, Joe Biden never had a platform, never talked about any issues last week at the convention, Democratic convention. He never talked about any issues. An absolute bold-faced lie. Coming from the very people, Mike Pence, whose party has no platform this year at the convention. The Republican Party has no platform. And none of these people has spoken about any of the issues. They have talked only about Donald Trump. They have talked only about the American flag. They have talked only about standing up and saluting the flag. And they've talked only about, Joe Biden's America. Oh my God. And the socialism. We will never be a socialist country. Even though there's corporate socialism running amok in this country, where time after time, during the first 3.5 years of Donald Trump's administration, Donald Trump gave tax breaks on at least 3 different occasions to the top 10% of earners in the country. The richest 10% got the biggest tax cuts. That's what corporate socialism is. And by the way, corporate socialism is also multi-million-dollar businesses and billion-dollar businesses getting PPE money that was supposed to go to small businesses. Do you remember that earlier this year? Literally, it was back in May and April, around May and June, somewhere around there, where the PPP money, which was supposed to be allocated to small businesses, mom and pop businesses, literally with less than 10 employees, they were supposed to get all this money to help them. And the money which Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, had allocated with negotiations with the Democrats and Republicans, or at least certainly with the House Democrats and the Senate Democrats, literally that money ended up, instead of going to the mom and pop stores, it was going to billion-dollar businesses like Shake Shack. I mean, The LA Lakers, and I'll get to the LA Lakers in a few minutes, the LA Lakers were getting PPP money. And these entities, and I mean, the Lakers are worth a mint. They are worth billions, the LA Lakers. And they're getting PPP money for what reason? I mean, this is corporate socialism. So when these speakers talk about corporate socialism, about, oh, we don't want socialism and we will never be a socialist country. Well, maybe they should look at these tax cuts. That's corporate socialism. That's corporate welfare. And Donald Trump has only kept promises for the rich in this country. He has never kept any other promise. He's only kept promises for the racists and for the rich. That is pretty much it as far as Donald Trump is concerned. And it was such with these businesses getting PPP money, they had to be shamed into returning the money. I mean, that's how bad it got. Shake Shack, the Lakers, a load of businesses. I mean, these are chains. And the way they got around this whole requirement that you had to be of a certain size business is that they declared that each of their operations were as an individual entity. They were not one company. And that was the loophole through which these billion dollar businesses were getting this PPP money. And if it wasn't for a lot of the outcry in the public shaming these folks for taking this money, they were taking $10 million, $15 million, $20 million, $5 million. Why? And they were trying to defend and justify that too, why they needed this money. These businesses are operating at a profit. But that's corporate socialism. I don't want socialism. Oh, yeah. You don't mind it when it's for you, though. When those tax cuts come in for you. For that top 10% of the country, the richest 10%. You don't refuse that money. And this is part of all of the hypocrisy that was on display last night and on display so far throughout this convention. And by the way, I did not expect anything less, or should I say anything more, from Donald Trump. I mean, this whole convention so far has been socialism, fear, hatred. Be afraid of black people because they're violent and they're in mobs. I mean, that's the message that they've sent you. They've sent you for these first 3 nights, and there's one more night to go. Tonight is the final night, and it will be the night of the Führer, because he will be speaking tonight, Donald Trump. And Lord knows how long his speech is going to be. He spoke for well over an hour, almost an hour and a half at the convention in 2016. So it'll be interesting to see how long he speaks for tonight. But so far, this whole convention on the Republican side has been all cynically packaged. You had a number of women being presented, all of them white women, to the best of my knowledge, on last night's Wednesday night, for night number 3. And they all look the same. These particular white women, they all look the same. They have a certain look. They have a certain build. For the most part, the only white woman that didn't look the same was the nun that was there. She was there talking about, life begins at conception and da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-dee, da-da-da-da-da-do. And the rest of it was, Donald Trump has been really wonderful with women, and he, yeah, okay. I would really invite, to the extent that any woman wants to or is ready to or feels compelled to. And, of course, a woman in this category doesn't have to come forward. But to the extent that there are women who may feel comfortable coming forward, they could definitely make a rejoinder video to the kind of hustle that we saw last night on night number 3, with women, white women, saying, oh, he's treated me so well. He's checked up on me. He's taken a look. And Kayleigh McEnany, whose pre-existing condition is lies. Look, I am very sympathetic to her. She talked about her struggles with breast cancer. She had to have a mastectomy. And like, I do, wish her very well on that medical level and on that personal note. But I just have to say that I think Kayleigh McEnany's, and she is the press secretary for Donald Trump. What, the third or fourth one? Fourth one, I think, because Stephanie Grisham, who is now the First Lady's Director of Communications, Melania Trump's, God, I might loathe to say that she's the First Lady, but she is. She's a racist. Come on, Melania Trump is a racist. Oh, can I see, I can't even do a voice, Barack Obama's birth certificate. Yeah, Lord, I'm not gonna ever try to replicate that voice. I want to see his birth certificate. She got on The View. Don't believe me? Look it up on YouTube. She spoke to Joy Behar on The View several years ago. It might have been 2014 or something, or 2012, whenever it was. You can find it on YouTube. And she spoke about this. Melania Trump got on there and talked about how I want to see his birth certificate. I might be able to get you some audio on that. But you can check it out on YouTube for sure. But my point is this was an absolute scam, and every night has been. I think Kayleigh McEnany's pre-existing condition is lying. I mean, she cannot stop lying. And she said, even before she took the job as press secretary, oh, I will never tell a lie. I give you my word. And she lied immediately in her first minutes in the job. You can't script this, can you? You just cannot. But this was a reality TV script with an Orwellian flourish. And when you've got people out there lying and saying that coronavirus is over, and Mike Pence lying and saying or intimating that Black Lives Matter killed a cop, which they didn't, it was a boogaloo person. The FBI has even put a report out about this, about the boogaloo movement, and this guy here in California who killed 2 cops. Boogaloo movement member, a racist, violent movement that wants a civil war, wants a race war, and conveniently Mike Pence ignores that. Conveniently, nobody mentions Jacob Blake, the young black man, 29-year-old black man, who was shot at least 7 times in the back. On top of that, at point blank range. And is now paralyzed from the waist down. And guess what? The cop who did it, and he's been identified, I haven't bothered to look up his identity. And it's funny because the media yesterday was saying, well, he's been identified, but then they would not share what his name was, what his name is, which is just another crazy story. But arrest this guy. Arrest him. Not one mention at this Republican National Convention of Jacob Blake. Not one. But all they talked about was law and order, law and order. That was really much of the theme, and Mike Pence was sounding it. Baseless attacks and lies about Joe Biden. oh, this is Biden's America. It'd be terrible. If Biden got in, it would be awful and our country would be devastated. Look, motherfuckers. And I don't curse often on this podcast. But my God, man. This is Donald Trump's America right now. And look, 181,000 people are dead in this country from coronavirus. Donald Trump has not acted. As of this moment, he still has not fully implemented the Defense Production Act. There are still people who are working in hospitals, nurses, attendants, who still don't have the PPE to do their work safely or more safely. To this very day, Donald Trump hates America. He doesn't like America. Mike Pence got up there, and people said, he loves America. He does. Donald Trump doesn't love America. The Republicans hate America. They look at America as something that can be exploited. And this convention has done that. Donald Trump looks at America as something that can be exploited and stolen and bankrupted and broken. And that's what he's successfully managed to pull off these last 3.5 years. Let's really be brutally honest about it. He's used a system that was designed for this because that is the system. And he decided to completely break that system and then bring a country to its knees. This country is so disoriented right now. And not only that, of all the lies that people were telling, this one guy got up there and spoke for 20 minutes and lied and said that, Donald Trump charmed Angela Merkel, the German chancellor. No, he damn well didn't. He called her the B word, I believe, or called her stupid. I mean, this is a guy who's had people take exams for him, his SAT exam, his entrance exams, taken those exams for him. And this guy is telling Angela Merkel, who is I think she's a chemist or a physicist, or she's definitely a chemist, has a degree in chemistry or something, I forget. And he's turning around and calling her stupid? Donald Trump has the nerve to do that? He did. He called her that, either to her face or on the phone. It's documented. New York Times had a big article on this stuff. I think it was back in June. I'll dig it up and give it to you when we come back from a commercial break. So you can go look this up yourself. All of the lies, all of the exploitation of America, of all the American flags, the jingoism. It's all an absolute con. You're being scammed. And that's pretty much all you need to know. Donald Trump is scamming you. He's trying to make a play for white women in the suburbs by putting out all of these white women who look like Stepford wives, telling you that, Donald Trump is so nice, and he cares. And as I was saying earlier, trying to finish saying, that it would be something, wouldn't it, if all of the women who have accused Donald Trump of either raping them or violating them in some way, if they were to come forward and make a video and just play that and that be used in a commercial somehow against Donald Trump. I mean, look, Hillary Clinton tried this. It wasn't very successful the way she was doing it, or the way people affiliated with her, PACs affiliated with her, did it. But these groups now who are putting out videos against Donald Trump, whether it's the Lincoln Group or whether it's, I guess it's Reality American or Real American, or whether it's the Republican voters against Trump or Joe Biden or Midas Touch or, the recount. I mean, there's so many, Priorities USA. There's so many of these groups who put together damn good ads. I'll be playing audio of one for you shortly. But this is what Donald Trump's doing. This is just really a cynical convention, among many other things. It's deeply offensive and exhausting. and it's designed to wear you down. It's psychological operations. It's literally a war. And it's a war predicated on lies, and really it's propaganda. It's a propaganda war, except it's really a war of propaganda on one side and one side only. MSNBC had to cut into that convention last night at least a dozen times in the 2.5 hours or so that it was on. I mean, at least a dozen times to fact check every damn thing. I'm going to have a few fact checks as well, interspersed in as well, while I talk about some other things. But this is, I'm telling you, Donald Trump's making a play for three kinds of individuals right now. One, anyone that's still quote unquote undecided. Two, suburban white women. And three, black men. And if you look at these last 3 days of this convention, for these first 3 days of the convention, with this one more night to go tonight, Donald Trump is making a real play for black men. He's had black men speaking every night on this convention. And I'm telling you, he had 3 or 4 black men on Wednesday night. NFL football players, he seems to love them, including the NFL football player who was indicted for insider trading this week, I guess it was. Jack Brewer. Oh, didn't he say he was a lifelong Democrat? On Wednesday night, I think he did. I don't remember. Donald Trump isn't a racist. Donald Trump is a good man, or whatever the hell he said. And he's bloomin' indicted for insider trading. Everybody that is speaking for Donald Trump either has some indictment for some crime, or they've been jailed, or whatever. And there were 2 other, I forget how many. I mean, it was at least three black men on Wednesday night. The night before there was, I think, 3 black men speaking, and the night before that there were 2 black men, I think it was. And don't forget, also on Tuesday night there was a black man who was pardoned, a guy who had robbed a bank and was convicted, and Donald Trump pardoned him. So Donald Trump is making a play for black men. Black men, 13% of black men voted for him in 2016. Trump, that is. And I'm telling you, people have better wake up about that. And by people, I'm talking about Joe Biden and his campaign. Joe Biden is going to have to do some major legwork, I think, to shore up black male voters. 87% of them voted for Hillary Clinton last time. And that's with a lot of black men and some black women who stayed home in 2016. Look, I have no doubt that the vast majority of black men are going to vote for Joe Biden. But Donald Trump does not have to worry about the vast majority. All he has to do is try to siphon off between 3 and 6% of that 87% total, or whatever, just 6% out of the 100%. And if he can siphon off between 3 to 6%, and there's going to be at least, starting off, 5 or 6% voting for him, if he can siphon off even 3%, he has a good chance. He doesn't need very many black men. All he has to do is make a play for them. And he's made, I can say this about Donald Trump, this week at this convention, he's made an aggressive play for them. With the lies, with the gaslighting, while not talking about a black man who was shot 7 times in the back, paralyzed from the waist down. These people are grifting you. And black men better wake up. So you all, your guy, to those black men who are even contemplating voting for this racist savage, the fact that you're even doing that, I guess you can do whatever you think, whatever you want. But all these lies about Donald Trump and prison reform and all this, it's just garbage. It's just those reforms were very minimal. I mean, you can't talk about throwing a bone to you on a minimal level and then looking at all as if the only area for black men or black people was criminal justice reform. Oh, give me a break. But do not be fooled by the con. Look, I know some people will. But all of this is to say that Joe Biden has got to get his act together. And yes, he made a video about Jacob Blake and talked about the need to end the violence, even though this violence is not really being caused by Black Lives Matter protesters. It's being caused by these white racists. Speaking of which, one of those white racists killed 2 people early yesterday morning in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Joe Biden has lots of work to do with black men. I think he should aggressively push for them and leave no stone unturned, especially after the Breakfast Club appearance a few months ago. He needs to really shore up that black male vote and strengthen it. And he has to also be aggressively courting Latinos as well, Latinx, because there's between 20 and 30% of the Latinx population also supporting Donald Trump. So I think Joe Biden should never, ever take those constituencies lightly, unlike one of his surrogates last week. And I've talked about her ad infinitum in that particular context. But right after this break, I'm going to be talking about a 17-year-old white male terrorist and racist who you can now call a 17-year-old white male terrorist, racist, and murderer. Next.
The man cannot tell the truth, but he combines it with being a narcissist. A narcissist at a level, whatever he does, he accuses everyone else of doing. The man cannot tell the truth, but he combines it with being a narcissist. A narcissist at a level I don't think this country's ever seen.
And my concern is that he would grab up that power and really treat the country as sort of his little bully fiefdom.
Donald Trump is everything I taught my children not to do in kindergarten.
He's been exploiting working Americans for 40 years.
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot.
He says he's for the little guy, but he's actually built a lot of his businesses on the backs of the little guy.
Donald Trump the other day said that, quote, if he tells a soldier to commit a war crime, the soldier will just go do it.
And I don't think Donald Trump has even read the Constitution, knows what's in the Constitution.
A toxic mix of demagoguery and mean-spiritedness and nonsense.
I just cannot support Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is a delusional narcissist and an orange-faced windbag.
Donald Trump is a con artist.
He doesn't know the difference between truth and lies. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth.
I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office.
That's the ad. Well, it's from a group called act.tv, and that's the ad as promised that I would play you the other side of the commercial break. They knew who Trump really was all along. Those are the voices of conservative Republicans who in 2015 and 2016 were telling the truth about Donald Trump. You can find that on YouTube. Search for They Knew Who Trump Really Was All Along. Some of the voices you heard there spoke at the convention this week, spoke at the Republican convention. Goes to show you how principles in politics are instantly thrown out of the window once the orange-faced windbag that you're talking about has gained power. Yes, indeed, everybody. Elections truly have consequences, as will this election. So get out there and vote, and make sure you vote early. I'll be talking a lot more about voting again in the next day or two on this podcast, so please stay tuned. And by the way, you can also find me on Twitter at the Popcorn, REEL. That is at the Popcorn, REEL. Some of the voices in that video that you heard, Lindsey Graham, the senator, he didn't speak at the convention, and he won't be, to the best of my knowledge, speaking tonight either. Senator Marco Rubio, who will not be speaking at the convention to the best of my knowledge. Glenn Beck, the TV and radio conservative, he is not speaking at the convention. Kellyanne Conway, she spoke last night at the convention, calling Donald Trump a champion of women. Oh, but in that clip you just heard, oh, he's a bully and he takes advantage of the little guy. Oh, but now he's a champion of women. Okay. Which is it, Kellyanne? Look, I mean, Kellyanne Conway's got a lot more important things to worry about than Donald Trump, quite frankly. So she's leaving the White House as basically one of the longest serving people in that Trump nightmare of a White House. She's leaving in a matter of days. By the end of the month, she'll be out. So, and not coming back either. She's got some family matters to attend to. And I think I've kind of alluded to that in the last day or two in the previous episode. And then some of the other people you heard in the video clips and the audio that you just heard. Ted Cruz, he's not speaking at the convention. Rand Paul, he spoke at the convention on Tuesday night and lied his ass off. And that's pretty much also Rick Perry. He did not speak at the convention, but he, I think, may speak tonight. I am not sure. Rick Perry, by the way, when he was running 4 years ago against Trump, he's the one that lacerated him in this speech. And I think it's somewhere on the internet still. You might be able to read that somewhere. It's properly done. It's really well done. But again, he became the energy secretary and then had to quit that job after a whole lot of stuff with Russia and all this other stuff came up with him. Anyway, that aside now, time to move on. And before I get to the white racist that people in the media seem to have this extraordinary sympathy for, let me get to something I mentioned earlier. I spoke about the New York Times and this story to put pay to these lies that were being told by, I think his name is Richard Grenfell or something like that, in this really unnecessarily long speech, which was designed to disorient people, like this whole convention, where he is saying, oh, Donald Trump, whoa, he charmed. He was a charmer to German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Bull crap. Well, I got the source wrong. It wasn't the New York Times. It was CNN. But I got the month right. I said May or June. I think I said June. And sure enough, June the 30th, you can go look this up on CNN.com. The headline, from pandering to Putin to abusing allies and ignoring his own advisors, Trump's phone calls alarm U.S. officials. That's from Carl Bernstein. He of Woodward and Bernstein fame, of All the President's Men, and these great journalists from the Washington Post, the two of them. By the way, Woodward's got a new book on Trump coming out, I think called Rage. He did one called Fear a couple of years ago, and now he's got one, I think, coming up in September, October, called Rage. But anyway, Carl Bernstein June 30th, 2020. He's a CNN analyst and chief analyst and correspondent for CNN, and he did a detailed video on this story that he sourced. I'm going to read part of this article that you can find. It's dated June 30th, 2020. From pandering to Putin to abusing allies and ignoring his own advisors, Trump's phone calls alarm U.S. officials. This is a disturbing read. It's by Carl Bernstein, B-E-R-N-S as in Sam, T-E-I-N. Now look, you can find this pretty easily, but I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs of this, maybe 3 paragraphs. 4 paragraphs. In hundreds of highly classified phone calls with foreign heads of state, President Donald Trump was so consistently unprepared for discussion of serious issues, so often outplayed in his conversations with powerful leaders like Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Erdogan. What the story doesn't say here, I'll break in here and say both of them are dictators. And both of them are enemy countries. Turkey and Russia are not allies to the U.S. They are enemy countries to the U.S. I continue as I read from Carl Bernstein's article. And so abusive to leaders of America's principal allies. This is Donald Trump that Carl Bernstein is writing about here. And so abusive to leaders of America's principal allies that the calls helped convince some senior U.S. officials, including his former secretaries of state and defense, 2 national security advisors, and his longest-serving chief of staff, that the president himself posed a danger to the national security of the United States, according to White House and intelligence officials intimately familiar with the contents of the conversations. The calls caused former top Trump deputies, including National Security Advisors H.R. McMaster and John Bolton, Defense Secretary James Mattis, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, and White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, as well as intelligence officials, to conclude that the president was often, quote, delusional, end quote, as 2 sources put it, in his dealings with foreign leaders. The sources said there was little evidence that the president became more skillful or competent in his telephone conversations with most heads of state over time. Rather, he continued to believe that he could either charm, jawbone, or bully almost any foreign leader into capitulating to his will, and often pursued goals more attuned to his own agenda than what many of his senior advisors considered the national interest. Hello? This is what he got impeached for with Ukraine. His own interest, his own political agenda, not the national interest or the national agenda. He got impeached for this last year. This article came out 6 months after he was impeached. And this article came out at the end of June of this year, a full 4.5 months after the Republican Senate acquitted Donald Trump in the impeachment sham trial run by Mitch McConnell. But let me continue on. These officials' concerns about the calls, and particularly Trump's deference to Putin, take on new resonance with reports that the president may have learned in March, that Russia had offered the Taliban bounties to kill U.S. troops in Afghanistan and yet took no action. I pause for extra effect. And they're telling you on the stage of the RNC Convention that he loves America. Donald Trump loves our country. He loves our military. It's what they were saying last night and on Tuesday night. He loves the military. Never mind the fact that he took money from the military budget, and put it into the wall to build this stupid racist wall that he's only built 300 miles of. And that is really all repair. It's not new wall. And it's your taxpayer money, America, that he's doing this with. He's taking from the military. I'm going to reread that portion. These officials' concerns about the calls, and particularly Trump's deference to Putin, take on new resonance with the reports the president may have learned in March 2020 that Russia had offered the Taliban bounties to kill U.S. troops in Afghanistan and yet took no action. Trump did nothing. CNN sources said that there were calls between Putin and Trump about Trump's desire to end the U.S. military presence in Afghanistan, but they mentioned no discussion of the supposed Taliban bounties. Now, how the hell is that possible? This guy is a traitor to the United States. And you knew that in 2018 when he got up there in front of the world in Helsinki and said, oh, Mr. Putin was very strong. He offered very strong assertions. And the U.S. intelligence agencies, well. And then he said the United States has been stupid. Everybody's been stupid. Everybody's been foolish, I think he said. The U.S. has been foolish. Why is an American president saying, a so-called president saying, that the U.S. has been foolish? Who does that? Which American president have you ever known who gets up on the stage and says, in front of the world, the United States has been foolish? By far, back to the article here, final paragraph that I'm going to read, and it goes on a bit more. Final paragraph here that I'm going to read to you. You've got to read this whole article. June 30 of 2020, when Donald Trump speaks tonight at the convention on this final night tonight, have this article handy. I'm going to have a freaking battery of information ready because that's the best way to fact check this guy in real time. Have the stuff ready and tweet up a storm because that's what I'm going to be doing tonight. I know most people aren't going to watch this convention because it is very disorienting. It's got no life to it, but that's the exact point. Even the former Senator Claire McCaskill, who you've heard audio from on this podcast the last night or two, from the last 2 nights of the RNC Convention, she tweeted last night that she was worn down. And I tweeted back to her, yeah, that's what they want you to be. They want you to be completely worn down and frustrated, and they want you to submit. And you cannot do that. You've got to fight back here. So let me read the rest of this paragraph, this last paragraph of what continues on for several more paragraphs. It's quite a lengthy article. But this is the last paragraph I want to get to put pay to these lies that I guess Richie Grenfell or whatever the heck his name was got up there at the convention, in the Republican convention last night, and lied about when he said, Trump was so charming to Merkel. By far the greatest number of Trump's telephone calls with an individual head of state were with Erdogan, dictator, who sometimes phoned the White House at least twice a week. This is an enemy country. This is Turkey. Now, this is the same Turkey and the same dictator Erdogan who Donald Trump absolutely helped in October of last year when he said, U.S. troops, you need to back off this Turkish-Syria border. I talked about this week in a previous episode. The soldiers backed down. The Kurds were left exposed because that's what the U.S. was doing. They were patrolling that border to protect the Kurds from the Turkish forces. And the Kurds were holding ISIS fighters as prisoners. The Kurds had taken 16,000 casualties in the wars with ISIS and everything, and with the Turks. And so once that level of protection by the US had been removed, and these troops drew down and backed off the border, it opened the door for Erdogan and the Turkish forces to come in. And it left the Kurds ripe for the slaughter. In fact, Kurds were killed left, right, and center. And the ISIS fighters broke free when the Turks came in. ISIS fighters were unleashed. They escaped, and they killed Kurds. And all you could see on the last few nights of the convention is the lies. Oh, Donald Trump defeated ISIS. I mean, this is like they are propagandizing and gaslighting you to death with this garbage. So Erdogan's been on the phone with Trump's been on the phone with Erdogan, and I think one of the reasons why Trump did this for Erdogan is because Trump, as this article talked about, interested more in his personal interest than the national security interest or the national interest, wanted to make sure that Erdogan had those two Trump towers built in Istanbul, the hotels, which I think have been built, and wanted them promoted. So he's going to do him a favor just so that Trump's hotels can get built and pumped up and everything else. And hundreds of Kurds were killed because of this, pretty much. And ISIS fighters were unleashed, escaping into Europe, thanks to Donald Trump. Yeah, so much for that defeat of ISIS. It's just ridiculous. So he is put through directly to the president on standing orders from Trump, according to the sources. Meanwhile, the president regularly bullied and demeaned the leaders of America's principal allies, especially two women. This is, of course, a constant thread in Donald Trump misogyny. Telling Prime Minister Theresa May of the UK she was weak and lacked courage. And telling German Chancellor Angela Merkel that she was, quote, stupid, end quote. Oh, yeah. But Donald Trump charmed Angela Merkel. Right. So on Wednesday morning, you wake up to this news that a white racist 17-year-old male killed two people in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And these people apparently were protesters who were supporting Black Lives Matter and protesting the police massacring of Jacob Blake, who is the 29-year-old African-American man who was shot at least seven, maybe 8 times in the back at point-blank range earlier this week. I mean, jeez. This is, I mean... And I have not watched the video, but I've heard so much about what happened, and this is just evil. And they've still not arrested that cop yet. And then you've got this story, this 17-year-old, I think his name is Kyle Rittenhouse. Guys, there's a video of him, and again, I didn't watch this either because I refuse to watch these things now. And the video has been described, though, and I'll describe it to you, and I won't go too graphically. But the bottom line is that he had already shot somebody fairly close range, and then was wandering down the street, and people were chasing after him, and they were shouting to the police saying, this guy shot somebody. And The police are down the other end of the street. The bottom line is that there are two people who tried to apprehend this guy, and he trips over, falls to the ground, the guy with a gun, and has an AR-15. AR-15, what is he doing with an assault rifle? What? I mean, open carry is in Wisconsin, but an assault rifle? It's a weapon of war. Bottom line is that he tripped over, fell down, and these two people tried to apprehend him. And he killed two of them. I mean, I'm not going to get graphic, but the bottom line is he killed two of these people who tried to stop him from killing more people. So these two people were also heroes, and they lost their lives. I know one of them was a white man. I think two of them may have been. I don't remember. But again, another example of there are people in this country and in this world who are white, who have sacrificed their lives in the cause for Black Lives Matter. This is not something that is a rarity. It has happened on a number of occasions in this country. And they died trying to save the lives of other people as well. This is just really horrible. And this guy walked away after he killed two people and had his hands up in the air, and the cops just drove right by him. That's what the video shows. That part of the video I did see. And everyone's there screaming at the cops. This guy killed two people. And the cops said nothing. And by the way, the cops also gave this guy water and threw water at him and said, "Thank you for being here." This is how the police are. They will let some white guy who's just murdered two people, this terrorist, racist, because his social media pages show that he's a racist and a misogynist and a staunch supporter of Donald Trump. And by the way, also was at the front row of one of his rallies. And he's a big supporter of the police and this Blue Lives Matter and all of that. It's just hideous. And then you've got the Kenosha sheriff talking all this nonsense and saying, well, this white guy, the 17-year-old, he felt that he had to resolve a conflict. I would play you the audio, but I just don't have the time. And I really should play it. But the bottom line is that's what this sheriff said. The Kenosha sheriff. And then later on, there was this bizarre press conference with the DA of Kenosha DA. And then, I don't know, the attorney general or something. And then the NAACP guy in that part of Wisconsin. And then this guy from the Racine Urban League. Saying all this crap. He said, black man from the Urban League in Racine, Wisconsin, and he's there in front of the press conference rambling and saying, well, black and brown people are emotional people. Yes, he said, black and brown people are emotional people. And I'm sitting there just absolutely shaking my head. As were many people that I know, and people on social media too. And that got no attention, of course. I know I'm fed up of people, and particularly black people, and particularly black men, talking down to black people and saying, be calm, be quiet, don't do anything, and never saying anything about these white killers who are murdering black and brown people, murdering black folk all over creation. And these MFers never say a darn word about these white terrorists, these racist, terrorist, white males. Like this 17-year-old who's getting all these very nice flowery descriptions of him. Oh, he's a troubled kid. And so Brian Williams on MSNBC last night. He's a troubled kid. Oh, he's a troubled kid. Yeah, the police never laid a glove on this so-called troubled kid who murdered 2 people and whose social media page has this misogynistic and racist and this bloomin', he's a white racist. He's a Trump supporter, so that makes him racist. And he's this, Blue Lives Matter. It's absolutely despicable. The guy's 17 years old. Even Lawrence O'Donnell. He's misguided. I had to tweet Lawrence O'Donnell and say, I'm sorry, Lawrence. This guy is not misguided. He has grown up on hate, and he still is. He is still consuming hate. He is full of it. Look at his social media page. Well, maybe not look at his social media page, but it's all there. And this notion that he's just troubled. He's a good old boy. He's a troubled kid. Ooh, he's a little troubled. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's always these white kids who drive 20 miles like this guy did, Kyle Rittenhouse. Driving 15 to 20 miles from Antioch, Wisconsin to Kenosha, Wisconsin. 20 miles with an AR-15 to supposedly guard property. You're not guarding property. You guys are there, you militia. And I wouldn't even dignify them with that term. These are murderers. White terrorists. I wouldn't dignify them with any label but white terrorist, racist, murderers. That is who these folks are. And they responded to a Facebook post from some, in these racist groups. And it was too late. Of course, Facebook got there. Yeah, they were real Johnnies on the spot, weren't they? They got there after all this stuff happened. The killing happened. They were nice and early, weren't they? Thanks a lot, Facebook. Thanks a lot, Mark Zuckerberg. You were nice and punctual. Before they removed the page. And Facebook has been a recruiting tool for these white racists. These violent, terrorist people. And Facebook is going to have to do something about this. You can't allow this to happen. This is not the first time Facebook posts have organized this kind of violence. It happened earlier in the summer in Minneapolis when these same racist people burned down the police precinct. And it's Black Lives Matter doing it. No, they infiltrate Black Lives Matter. I've told you in previous episodes about FBI reports and investigations that show all of this. They're these white racist groups. So I think it's about time that Facebook do a whole lot better. Kyle Rittenhouse has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, which is the equivalent in Wisconsin of first-degree murder. 2 counts. And I believe he's still in prison right now, still in jail at the moment. Although I don't know if he got... that's what I know. That's what I was aware of. Maybe that's changed. Maybe it's not. But he is charged with these 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide. But he wasn't arrested straight away. I want you to understand, this guy was able to wander and roam while police drove away from him as he had his hands up. Now, I doubt it very highly that had a black man shot 2 people dead, 2 white people, with the police in full view of it, and he happened to have an AR-15, and he held his hands up, and he walked away. I really doubt that he would have been allowed to get away. Just ask Jacob Blake. Welcome back. So, on Wednesday, Elizabeth Newman, who was in the Threat Assessment Division of the Department of Homeland Security, she dealt with terrorist threats, particularly on the issues of extremist groups, these white racist groups, violent groups like that. And she left the Trump administration this year and had voted for Donald Trump in 2016. She is a Christian and she is someone who is pro-life, and that was the principal reason she voted for Donald Trump, because she thought he was pro-life. And she served in his administration in that division, the Threat Assessment Division of the Department of Homeland Security. And it was very clear to her, well, I don't want to give this away, because she was on Anderson Cooper on Wednesday, and she talked for a good maybe 9 minutes or 10 minutes or so, or whatever it was. And I just want to play you a portion of that, about 3 or 4 minutes that she speaks here, and really gets to the heart of things. Listen to this. You really have to listen to this.
I know you personally tried to get the White House to pay attention to the threat of violent domestic extremists. How receptive was the Trump White House?
So tragic what happened in Kenosha. I was listening to your previous segment. It's really gut-wrenching to watch that tape. The challenge that we're seeing play out across our country, however, we've been tracking this for 3 or 4 years now. We recognized that the threat had morphed and shifted a bit in 2017. We were keeping tabs on it. How much was it shifting? But certainly by the time you got to Charlottesville or the following year, the activities in Pittsburgh, the shooting at the synagogue, and then it exploded with what happened in Christchurch. And you've started to see this is not just a American problem. This is a globalized effort, a globalized white supremacy movement that is calling for a race war. They're calling for their adherents to commit acts of violence. And the ideology is perverse, and it's getting mixed and confused, and it's very hard to kind of pinpoint what might cause somebody to mobilize to violence. And when you're a government official, you have to be very careful. Anybody in the United States is able to hold weird ideologies, and we do have First Amendment protections. The concern we have from a counterterrorism perspective is some of those ideologies have a history of mobilizing people to violence, particularly violence against people. And what we saw is the white supremacist movement, the anti-government movement, did have that pattern and practice of mobilizing people to violence for decades. There have been more people killed in the United States by white supremacists than in recent years than an Islamist jihadist terrorism threat and all other ideologies combined. I think what's particularly challenging is in the last few months, instead of recognizing that those voices, which we've been watching for 3 years, may take advantage of some of these peaceful protests. That's a pretty normal tactic, to use peaceful protests as a cover to do violent activities. It's harder for us to track them. It's harder for us to know that they're planning an attack. Instead of calling that out, they've been pointing out they're making it more political, focusing on Antifa, which I have to tell you, for 3 years I received intelligence briefings, and never once did I get told that Antifa is our greatest threat because they're going to carry out attacks on people. They do have a tendency to cause disruption, civil unrest, crimes against property, all of which are serious and need to be treated appropriately by law enforcement, but it's not the same as what happened in El Paso or Poway or Christchurch. We have a growing threat in this country, and it is not Antifa. It is this white supremacist anti-government ideology. And I will let the law enforcement personnel investigate what happened last night, but on the surface, it looks like more of that type of threat.
There you go. There you go. No Antifa, no cases of Antifa in all the time, I think it was 3 years, whatever it was, that she was in that administration. No threat assessments, no warnings about Antifa. It was all white, racist, terrorist groups. The Boogaloo folk, whether it was the Klan, whether it was the Proud Boys, whether it was some so-called militia group. Militia, my foot. These are just white terrorists. That's what they are. Killers. Nazi groups. These Confederate. That's what she was getting on her desk. And you heard what she said about white racists being embedded in that administration. Now, that should not surprise you too much with what you know about Donald Trump and Steve Miller. And, Steve Bannon's arrested, isn't he? He's out. But and he was in the national security team. He was given, Bannon, the racist, was given national security clearance before he was finally tossed out. And Jared Kushner had not too kind things to say, for sure, and that was well deserved. But the point is that Elizabeth Newman, who voted for Donald Trump and thought that he was pro-life, and she's a staunch, she's a Christian, and she said, I'm out of here. These guys, Donald Trump is not interested in dealing with these white racist terrorist groups. These white terrorist groups, he has no interest in dealing with. She would do all these things, and he just didn't care. So she was out. And by the way, she's made a video for Republican voters against Trump. And in that video, which she made on Wednesday, or at least was released yesterday, she announced that she was voting for Joe Biden. As a Republican, she was going to vote for Joe Biden. And there are more and more officials coming out. There's supposed to be more officials coming out, as Miles Taylor did last week, and he said that by Labor Day there'll be more, and so far he's been proven correct because lots have come out, and there's supposed to be more. Now, the only question I have to ask is this going to influence or affect the average Republican voter? Because still there's supposed to be loads of them who are going to vote for Donald Trump no matter what. So that was really extraordinary stuff. Although I'm not surprised by some of what Elizabeth Newman had to say, it was still eye-opening and very instructive. Very instructive and very telling. This is the lie that you're not hearing, right? This is the lie that they're telling you at the RNC, rather. This is, the truth that you are not hearing, right? Elizabeth Newman is speaking the truth, and she saw this with her own two eyes, as have many others. And the lie of the National Convention that the Republicans are having right now is, we want freedom for everybody. No, you don't. We want to stamp out we want law and order. No, you don't. You want chaos. And not only do you want chaos, you have chaos. You are chaos. Tear gassing protesters in Lafayette Square, June 1st, 2020. For your photo op. Bringing in unmarked cars and these Border Patrol people with no ID into Portland in July and August, who were kidnapping and renditioning people off the street. That's not law and order. That's chaos and illegality. Chaos. It's not law and order. It's chaos and disorder. Criminality. Law and order with all of these people speaking on the stage at the RNC. They've all been indicted or they're about to be. And a guy in the White House has been impeached and he's committed 1 billion offenses and criminalities that violated the emoluments clause. And the guy wanted to have Woody Johnson ask the British to have the British Open be at his golf course at Turnberry. And Woody Johnson, the ambassador to the UK, actually asked the UK government, and they said, hell no. Thank goodness. I mean, you want to talk about criminality and chaos and disorder. Oh my God. It really is Orwellian.
I was just going to say, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, right? Daniel, and part of the law and order messaging tonight that Pence spoke about an officer killed in a riot in Oakland, California. That is not exactly what happened. Can you please give us the details?
It's not. So this is an example of how you can be dishonest without even making a direct claim. So when Vice President Pence talks about a police officer killed in a riot in Oakland or California, you probably think Black Lives Matter was the perpetrator, or Antifa, or someone on the left. In fact, the person charged with this murder is allegedly affiliated with the far-right extremist Boogaloo movement that seeks to kill police officers and take other actions to foment a second civil war or a race war. They're trying to use these protests as cover for their own ends. So again, Pence didn't directly say, this was a left-winger, but I think that was the clear inference, and it's just wrong.
That's how I took it. I mean, it is dirty pool.
Welcome back. Finally, last but not least on this episode, I couldn't be prouder of the WNBA players and the NBA players who took a stand yesterday and refused to play. I just thought that was an excellent thing. It made major news, and I'm pleased that the NBA players from the Milwaukee Bucks, and it was the players' idea. It was no one else's, by the way. The players originated this. It wasn't the Bucks organization and the owner, because I'm sure he or she, he probably was not encouraging that. But the Milwaukee Bucks, because Milwaukee's less than, I think, 25 minutes or 25 miles, whichever one, from Kenosha, Wisconsin. And so the Bucks said, hell no, And this was a decision apparently made, according to various sports writers on Twitter and elsewhere, fairly quickly and with not much notice at all or of any consent. They did this, and they didn't have to get consent. I mean, these guys in the NBA are taking a major risk in doing this because they are violating their contracts to play, which means that their contract could be terminated. But what are they going to do? Terminate every single player's contract? They all walked out. It's completely a I am Spartacus moment. So the Bucks refused to play, and they never actually left the locker room. I was mistaken. I tweeted something earlier on my Twitter handle earlier yesterday at the Popcorn REEL, where I said that the Bucks had walked off the court. That was the Orlando Magic, their opponent. It was to be Game 5 of the NBA playoffs. The Bucks were up 3-1. And they're playing in this bubble down in Walt Disney World there down in Florida. And so the Orlando Magic were all out there, warming up on the court. Then they got word that the Bucks were not coming out to play from the locker room. And apparently some sources, reliable ones in sports, said that the Bucks were on the phone in a conference call to the Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes of Wisconsin, and also on the call to oh my gosh, who's the other official? Name escapes me at the moment. Maybe the Attorney General or something of Wisconsin. I forget now. And so there were some things being said there, and they said, "Look, we're not going to play." And I think they were trying to ask them for some concessions. They wanted to make sure, look, you've got to get involved and really do a very speedy investigation, careful and speedy investigation into this shooting. Although I don't know what the hell you're investigating. It's all right there on video. What is there to investigate? I mean, I don't know what was actually said, but I'm sure that the players were conveying that they were not going to play with this going on. And then this shooting yesterday that happened. 2 people dead. So you're shooting and killing protesters, and you're not doing anything about arresting this cop that the world saw do this? No body cameras? Really? Are you kidding me? Are you nuts? So the Milwaukee Bucks players said, we are done with this. We aren't playing. And so they left. And then soon after that, the Orlando Magic walked off the floor. And then soon after that, the NBA put out a statement and said, we are canceling the playoff games for tonight. There were going to be 2 other games, and one of them was involving the Lakers, I think, and maybe the Clippers. Lakers and the Portland Trailblazers and the Clippers, I think, were supposed to play, or maybe they did play. Doc Rivers made a statement the night before, a statement that I really don't have time to play, but I would love to play it maybe next episode. But the point is that the NBA announced soon after, within an hour or so, that they were canceling all the playoff games and that they would be rescheduled, but there's no rescheduled date yet. And, at this point, then you come to find out later on in the evening last night, LeBron James, who he's really has been a leader now for years now. This guy, I have so much respect for. Real respect. He's been the voice of this movement in the NBA among these among these young men. And he held a vote, and the players vote from all the league. And it turned out that there were only 2 teams that wanted to boycott the season, that voted to boycott the season out of the X amount of teams left. I think 16 teams left, because it was all just the postseason stuff now, and all the teams that were eligible for that or who had been there. And the only 2 teams that wanted to boycott and voted to boycott the rest of the NBA playoffs, and thus the season, were the 2 Los Angeles teams, the Clippers and the Lakers. And those are the teams with the 2 best records in the NBA. Lakers had the best record, or in the West certainly, if not overall. I really have not followed the NBA this season at all. I've just not. Before or after the pandemic. And my New York Knicks, they stink, and have for such a long time, unfortunately. But that's beside the point. The Lakers had clinched the number 1 seed, had home court throughout these playoffs, and were favorites to win the NBA title. The Milwaukee Bucks, I think, the best record in the East, but they were favorites to get to the finals. And those 2 teams were the top 2 teams, and then the Clippers, had a stellar record as well. And those 2 teams, the 2 Los Angeles teams, voted, we are out of here. We're not playing any more games. And they were the only 2. The other teams said, no, we want to keep playing. I don't know how the NBA is going to do that. And quite frankly, I don't care. There should be no sports. There should be no sports anywhere. And I also want to salute the women from the WNBA who took a similar stand, a really great message. And I am going to play this because I think it's very important that it is played. So you can hear this. This was a really good message from, I think, one of the player representatives who is an NBA player herself, who made this statement loud and clear. And I'm going to read it to you, or rather, I'm going to play it, the audio of it to you. You got to listen to this because I really am proud of this young lady, and I want to salute her and make sure that her voice gets the attention it certainly should. Because, hey, as far as I'm concerned, she's a patriot. This is activism. I've done an episode on this before on this podcast about the long history of activism in sports, and dating back decades to Muhammad Ali, dating back even longer back than that, back to the early 1900s with Jack Johnson and what's his name, Jesse Owens at the Berlin Olympics in the 30s. I want to play this to you now. Just listen to this.
They have changed their mind, and Elizabeth Williams would like to read this statement. After speaking with representatives from teams playing tonight, as well as our WNBPA leadership, the consensus is to not play in tonight's slate of games and to kneel, lock arms, and raise fists during the national anthem. We stand in solidarity with our brothers in the NBA and will continue this conversation with our brothers and sisters across all leagues and look to take collective action. What we have seen over the last few months, and most recently with the brutal police shooting of Jacob Blake, is overwhelming. And while we hurt for Jacob and his community, we also have an opportunity to keep the focus on the issues and demand change. These moments are why it's important for our fans to stay focused, hear our voices, know our hearts, and connect the dots from what we say to what we do. We encourage everyone to go and register to vote now, today. If you truly believe that Black Lives Matter, then vote. Go and complete the 2020 census now. Your voice matters. Your vote matters. Do all you can to demand that your leaders stop with the empty words and do something. This is the reason for the 2020 season. It is in our DNA. We have been saying her name. We are lifting the names of Black and brown women whose murders have been forgotten. We will continue to use our platform to speak of these injustices that are still happening and demand action for change. Black Lives Matter, say her name. Say his name. Tonight, we stand, and while we have heavy hearts, we stand with strong and determined voices and ask all our fans to vote, to engage, and to make that difference.
I am so proud of Elizabeth Williams, and that's who you just heard. I'm so proud. I'm so pleased. I'm moved by her courage and by her statement and by her example. She is the representative for all NBA players, all WNBA players. And the audio cut out a bit. I'll replay a piece of that in a moment, but the audio cut out a bit there. I am so pleased and moved by Elizabeth Williams, and I want to thank Elizabeth Williams. Thank you, Elizabeth, for your shining example and for your solidarity and for your initiative and for encouraging people to vote, for telling people to vote. You've got so many people, some people on Twitter trying to make it seem like, oh, well, you don't really want to vote. It's a trick. Do not listen to people who are like that on Twitter or any social media who are saying to you, what's the use of voting? Ignore people like that. They are trying to discourage you from voting. It's the old Putin trick from 4 years ago. Don't get suckered. So it was really good to see Elizabeth Williams just read that great statement out and also fill out the census. Please do that too. I mean, this is just great from her. Wow. I'm so proud of her. And I love and respect that young sister for doing what she did, for the statement she just made. I shouted her out on Twitter, and you can too. She is on Twitter at E_Williams_1, and that's the number 1. E_Williams_1. And she is one in a million. And just absolutely love what she said, what she did. And the games were canceled last night in the WNBA as well. I loved how she said what she said, and what she said meant everything. Say her name, say his name, say their names. Black trans lives also matter here. And, Black lives matter. All Black lives matter. And no one's lives matter until Black lives also matter. And so what a statement. I am just thoroughly overjoyed. I mean, I don't want to overblow it because I'm not. I genuinely feel happy and full that all of these players in the NBA and WNBA are taking this stand. And we'll see what happens because changes have to be made. We cannot live like this in this country, and we cannot keep dying like this in this country or being injured like this in this country. And as I've said many times to some white people in person, and James Baldwin has said this, and Dick Gregory had said this as well. The two of them are no longer with us. Until white people stop carrying in their minds this their own invention, this invented figure of a black person as a dread, terrifying figure in their own minds until white people stop doing that and stop carrying that figure of dread of a black person in their minds. Oh, a black person's out to get you. White people will never be free in this country. This is what Donald Trump is taking advantage of and what this RNC is taking advantage of. As long as white people continue to carry around in their minds this dread figure of a black person, oh my God, they're so scary. As long as white people do that, they will never be free. And quite frankly, nor will anybody else, because white people are imprisoned by this self-invented and racist terror figure. I mean, they've completely invented this. Go and watch I Am Not Your Negro, the documentary from 2016 that features James Baldwin, and it's still on Netflix as best I know. I've done an audio commentary on this thing, and I will be doing another audio commentary on this before this month is out. You just have to watch this documentary. So anyway, I want to thank Elizabeth Williams. And I also want to, before I even play this next clip that's a few minutes long, thank Professor Brittany Cooper from Rutgers University, who was on MSNBC last night. I believe it was Ari Melber. I DVR all these things and then, play them back. And you can get to listen to some of this audio. And I will try to post some of it on social media as well, the video of it. Because it's quite great what the professor said. You're going to hear from her right now in this audio. And she talks about the NBA players, and she talks about racism. She talks about anti-black racism. She talks about whiteness and the system of whiteness that I've talked about a lot. And whiteness, well, I don't want to give it away. You have to listen to this. And by the way, may I say, kudos also to Naomi Osaka, the world's number one player. She decided to, earlier last night, drop out of her match. She was going to play in a tennis tournament, and I think she's going to play in whatever round it was in. I forget now. She's on Twitter as well, and she posted a letter on Twitter saying, I am also refusing to play. I have forfeited, or I'm going to drop out of my tennis match in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and in solidarity with the WNBA and NBA players. And also, by the way, so kudos to Naomi Osaka for that. I think every athlete now should follow suit. The Major Leagues of Baseball, there were 3 games that didn't get played last night as well. The San Francisco Giants, who were to host their bitter rivals, the LA Dodgers, they canceled their game. They refused to play. The Seattle Mariners were hosting the San Diego Padres. They decided not to play. That's happened. The Milwaukee Brewers, obviously, they were supposed to play the Cincinnati Reds. They refused to play. So the MLB canceled those games. But I think there was a game the Colorado Rockies played, but Matt Kemp sat out that game and said he wouldn't play. And the Rockies put out a statement and said they support Matt Kemp, but they still played their game. NHL, however, they're still playing. National Hockey League, it's just a bunch of nonsense. You make all these overtures. Oh, Black Lives Matter, just about a month ago, even less than that, right? You had some guy from the Minnesota Wild, maybe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago now, and he was there and he was making this grand statement and yes, Black Lives Matter. And then what are these guys doing? They're playing Stanley Cup hockey. I'm sorry. You have to take a stand, seriously. And that doesn't mean you punch Logan Couture because he says you should vote for Trump, even though I vehemently disagree with him. He shouldn't be punched for that. He shouldn't be sucker punched for that, because that's exactly what happened to him. Even though Logan Couture can't vote himself, he's not an American citizen. He plays for the San Jose Sharks, NHL. But the NHL is a joke. The NHL has long had issues with racism and misogyny. I mean, Mike Milbury and Jeremy Roenick. I mean, there's so many of these white guys who are misogynist pigs and who are racist. You know, there was a big fight years ago on the NHL ice between Donald Brashear and this white hockey player, and they were going at it, and maybe I think Brashear had been called a racist name, and, you know, it got pretty crazy. But the point is that NHL is just prehistoric, and the NFL now, I think Roger Goodell has got to put his money where his mouth is. All these owners have got to decide whether they want to side with money or whether they want to side with lives and supporting lives. Because Goodell, a couple of months ago, made this big overture about, oh, yes, we support Black Lives Matter and we're against systemic racism. And then they want a season to start in 2 weeks. With this coronavirus, I don't think so. And certainly now, NFL has 77% black players. I think I called for them to do this years ago, to boycott and to refuse to play. And now that the NBA and WNBA have done it, and some in the MLB have done it, let's see in 2 weeks' time whether the NFL will do it, or will this all be over in 2 weeks? We've got to keep supporting and lifting up these players and let them know that we support them as we fight for justice for Jacob Blake, for Breonna Taylor, for Ahmaud Arbery, for George Floyd, for Rayshard Brooks, for many others. And a young brother who in New Orleans, I believe, somewhere or elsewhere in Louisiana, which is being battered by a hurricane right now as I speak. There was a brother there who was shot 11 times in the back within a few hours after the shooting of Jacob Blake. He's not even being talked about. But I want to play this audio now from Brittany Cooper, the professor there at Rutgers University in New Jersey. Listen to this.
You know, Ari, I'm listening to this, and the thing I'm thinking about beside my rage is we need to make a clear distinction between the things that white people fear, which are largely based in delusion. White people fear that black people are coming to take their power. This is the thing the RNC is actually promoting this week, the idea that black people are coming to abolish the suburbs and take their neighborhoods and take their guns. And so what is problematic is that there's a segment of white people in this country who are actually in a race war. And the president is ginning them up to treat us like we are enemy combatants that they can shoot on sight and that they can do with impunity. And so we need to be calling out that thinking, because what I want people to hear when they hear Doc Rivers speak is the actual fear that black people face, that our lives are actually being taken. We aren't going into white neighborhoods and killing anybody. We aren't going into white neighborhoods. We can't. Have you seen all of the stories about how black people can't even get the same refinance rates on their mortgages in this moment where people are getting great deals on refinancing? We can't even refinance the homes we have, let alone going and taking over the wealth of the suburbs. And so there is a delusion at the heart of whiteness that is driving this violence, and it is our job to say. And one of the reasons that I'm so happy that these players are standing up and saying, we will not play, is that they are tapping into the source of their power. They know that one of the ways that whiteness will relent is when you begin to hit it in the pocketbook. And one of our most recent examples of that, remember, is that at the beginning of Black Lives Matter in 2015, football players at Mizzou boycotted because they wanted the president to resign. He wouldn't resign after engaging in lots of racial activity that was problematic. And one game where the player said, we will not play, forced him to step down. And so sports has to reckon with the way that it has exploited black men over many years to build up the entertainment that most Americans love, and then said that you will play for us, but we will not participate in a world where we protect you. And so they are using their power to demand protection, not just for black men, but for all black people who are killed by state violence. And it is our job, particularly if you're a white person of conscience, to begin to really reckon with this white violence that is at the center of this thing. And not get so upset when I say it and I'm mad, it isn't because I lack objectivity. I'm very clear. I'm angry because we are the ones who are clear. Whiteness is the thing that is moving from a space of delusion, but it is also the thing that is moving from a space of power and an active willingness to use violence. Very last thing, let us not ever equate Black people expressing their frustration when they do attack a building or a window. I know that that frustrates people, but let's be clear about something. Life matters more than property. I am not suggesting that people should loot or riot, but I am saying let us keep our priorities clear, because no one is trying to destroy buildings and people's livelihoods when they know that their lives are going to be protected.
Brittany Cooper, the Professor Cooper, she's always on point. I think her Twitter handle is Professor Crunk, C-R-U-N-K. I think that's all one word, or there may be an underscore between the end of the word professor and the beginning of the word crunk, or it could be all one word, but you've got to follow her. I think she's terrific. Professor Cooper there with Ari Melber laying it out. And there's nothing to add to that as far as I'm concerned, because I think she nailed it, absolutely nailed it, as she always does. By the way, also, I should talk of, speaking of people who nailed it or who decided enough is enough, Kenny the Jet Smith. He, of course, Hall of Fame NBA player who used to play for the Houston Rockets back in the day. I remember him against the New York Knicks, and I watched the NBA Finals in person at Madison Square Garden, and he certainly livened things up for the Rockets, and as they beat us back in 1994. But Kenny the Jet Smith, as many of you who watch the NBA know, or who watch the NBA on TNT, the sports cable station in the U.S., is one of the people who is on the panel of a very entertaining pre- and post-game show called Inside the NBA. And Inside the NBA usually has Shaquille O'Neal, as you know, him and Charles Barkley and Ernie Johnson, who I think is a really cool guy. He's gone through a lot of ups and downs, but he's a really genuinely nice person, nice guy. And Kenny the Jet Smith. And, last night, Kenny the Jet Smith, during their on-air, I guess it was during the pregame of one of these games that was supposed to go on, or after the game, or after, during the discussion when it was clear that these games were not going to play, Kenny the Jet Smith decided that he too was going to say sayonara. I mean, he'd had enough of it. He'd had enough too. So I don't know if you can hear this very well, but I'm going to try to play this for you. Kenny the Jet Smith, during the show, listen to Kenny the Jet Smith here as he decides what he's going to do. Listen to this.
I think the biggest thing now is to kind of, as a black man, as a former player, I think it's best for me to support the players and just not be here tonight. And figure out what happens after that. I just don't feel equipped.
And I respect that. Shaquille.
Yeah, Shaquille, what do you have to say about it? He's not walking off anywhere, Shaquille O'Neal. He's a corporate guy. So he's not walking anywhere. Let's be honest. Look, I don't want to dig, and nor is Chuck Barkley. Chuck Barkley, too. Both of those guys have sponsorships up the wazoo. Kenny the Jet Smith does not have so many sponsors. Very few, as a matter of fact. But the point is, I applaud Kenny Smith for doing that. Thank you, sir, for walking off the set of Inside the NBA last night, yesterday. You heard him loud and clear, and I think that he did the right thing. Quite frankly, they should all have walked off, including Ernie Johnson. I know the bosses at Turner Sports would be pissed. So freaking what? Be pissed at the fact that Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back and at point blank range. Be pissed at the fact that Breonna Taylor was gunned down in her home, and still nearly 6 months, almost 6 months later, these cops have not been arrested or charged. The cop in the shooting of Jacob Blake, who is now paralyzed from the waist down, has not been arrested. Be pissed about that. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of The Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.
We encourage everyone to go and register to vote now, today. If you truly believe that Black Lives Matter, then vote. Go and complete the 2020 census now. Don't wait. If we wait, we don't make change. It matters. Your voice matters. Your vote matters. Do all you can to demand that your leaders stop with the empty words and do something. This is the reason for the 2020 season. It is in our DNA. We have been saying her name. We are lifting the names of Black and brown women whose murders have been forgotten. We will continue to use our platform to speak of these injustices that are still happening and demand action for change. Black Lives Matter. Say her name. Say his name. Tonight, we stand, and while we have heavy hearts, we stand with strong and determined voices and ask all our fans to vote, to engage, and to make that difference.